Thank you, Coach Harness, for joining me today. Coach Harness is currently the wide receivers coach out at Southeastern, Oklahoma State. Coach, kind of real quick for people who don't know who you are, if you won't mind giving a little bit of background about yourself.
All right, my name is Jeremy Harness. I'm originally from Huntsville, Alabama. I went to college at Murray State University. It's right there on the Kentucky-Tennessee line. After I played there, I ended up getting the opportunity to go to some workouts and some camp and work out and train with the Atlanta Falcons for a little bit. Then I ended up getting cut from there and going to and went back to Murray State where I was a student assistant. I was a student assistant there for a year. After being there, I ended up going to the high school. I ended up going to a high school, Central Hardin High School, where I coached there for the season. And then that's in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And then after that, I ended up getting an opportunity to come here at Southeastern. That was in the 2018 season. That was when I came here. And then I've been here for 2 years, going on my third year now.
Awesome, Coach. Now, you mentioned you had a brief stint in the NFL. What did you take away of that and bring to coaching?
Just the attention to detail. Every day is really about just making sure that every day when you show up, you got to make that play that makes everybody say wow. And so it's like every day, and it's not necessarily about always. You might not necessarily be getting the ball on each play, but it's about what are you doing on that play? Are you bursting off the ball? Are you trying to help somebody else get open? It was just a lot of attention to detail, a lot of technique stuff, a lot of things that comes with that if you aren't playing at a high level, it's a lot of technique things different with like even with playing on a different size field. So it's just technique and attention to detail stuff.
Okay, Coach. Now like you said, you've kind of been at Southeastern the past 3 years, and you've had the opportunity to work for two different coaches. How as an assistant, how was that transition? What did you kind of learn from that transition from one coach to another?
It was fairly new for me because when I was a GA, I didn't really understand how that process went. When the coach leaves, kind of what happens from that time. So I was a graduate assistant at that time. So when after Coach Atterbury ended up going to Arkansas Tech, I'm going into our athletic director's office asking him like, well, what happens now? Do y'all still pay for my schooling? What happens? And then I was blessed enough to have a coach as good as Coach Fenwick to come in, and basically during that spring, it was kind of like a little trial run. We kind of went through some things. It was almost like an interview. We had like a little trial run of how things were going to go, and he ended up giving me a job full time, and it was kind of an easy transition for me. Because I've been around different offenses, been around many different coaches, and I feel I'm a very adaptable person. So it was pretty easy transition. It was just easy to adapt to it.
Okay, Coach. And then kind of let's get into some receiver play because what are your practice periods look like? What does your focus typically be? I know you guys run some option routes and stuff like that in your offense, so. How at the same time, how do you practice that as well?
Really, my thing when it comes to a receiver is can he catch. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing is can he catch. So a lot of things that we do are going to be triggered around doing a lot of ball drills. So I'm making sure that we can catch everywhere on the clock, all the way around the clock. So that's one thing is I like to put a lot of attention on ball drills. And then when it comes to making decisions, I try to get a lot of that stuff done during the routes on air period, and just trying to get the guys to and when we go to routes on air, like I'll play as if I'm a defender in front of them, and so now they got to make decisions off me. And my main thing about making decisions on option routes is make your decision and stick to it. Once you make that decision, you got to roll with it. You got to and make that decision full speed as well. Because one thing I wholeheartedly believe in when it comes to even coaching is you can do something that's not necessarily fundamentally or technically sound, but as long as you're doing that thing full speed, a lot of times you're gonna get good results from it. So even when they're making decisions, make sure they make that decision, stick to that decision, and just roll with it. And make sure they're making that decision full speed.
Okay, Coach. And then you said you coached the high school level for a little bit. What do you kind of think? I mean, and you also watch a lot of high school film with your recruiting. What do you think high school receiver coaches tend to overlook when they're trying to develop receivers?
Just the fundamentals. I mean, right now it's a lot of kids are all on social media and they're seeing all these different guys training, and they look at people might watch different training tools of Devontae Adams and all these great receivers. But the thing is that they don't. One thing that they're not realizing is that these guys started off at some point. They didn't start where you see them at now. So a lot of those drills they had to work to get to that level. So really it's kind of just my whole thing when you're at the high school level, it's about, and even at the college level, it's about the fundamentals. It's about just teaching them fundamentals of getting off the ball hard. How do you get off the ball? After you get off the ball, one of my big things that I always see is when you'll see some press coverage at the high school level, but not much. So it's a lot of soft coverage, and a lot of things I'm looking at is okay. Now he does burst off the ball well. Let's say I got a receiver and I say, okay, he does burst off the ball well. Now the second thing is he working his route off the defender? So when he bursts off the ball, is he just bursting straight down the field, or is when he bursts off the ball, do I see him working a stem? You get what I'm saying? So those are some of the things that I'm looking at. So like, and I think that's something and that's one of the first things that I got to get a lot of receivers to do when they come to me is just understanding to work a stem. So when you working a route, if you're working off air, it's easy. You easy to guard. But if you're working your route off somebody, now I can actually go. Now you're talking about winning a route and talking about leverage and stuff like that. So just sticking to the fundamentals, coaching fundamentals, and making sure that the receivers, when it comes to catching, they can catch the football. And then the next thing is just really learning a lot of stuff about leverage. That's one thing I think is undercoached.
Oh, I agree 100%, Coach. Now, kind of going into game day stuff, where are you on game day, and then kind of what are your responsibilities?
I'm on the field. I do a lot of I do signaling, and then my job is to really look at the secondary. I'm really just looking at the secondary and looking at backside of plays, just depending on whatever Coach Film is calling at that time, and just how we've talked about this week on what he think we should be looking at and what should be open. And so kind of my eyes, most of the time his eyes will be on whatever he's thinking will be open, and my eyes will go to the backside of that. So that's basically, I'm kind of looking at a lot of backside stuff.
Okay, and then for scouting purposes, how involved are you in the scouting process, and then what are your typical responsibilities for film breakdown?
Film breakdown, I got coverage, so I break down all coverage, and then for like game planning wise, I just help a lot with our passing game whenever we're going to whenever we're going to a game, formationally, personnel, really just a lot of everything involved in the passing game.
Now, I mean, kind of going back, I mean, you mentioned coverage there. How much time do you spend on teaching your receivers coverages, especially given the fact you guys run so many option routes?
Yeah, that's very important. That's one of the main things when they come in is we're gonna talk coverages from day one till every day. We're gonna talk coverages at some point during the day, especially when we get to routes on air. At some point, we're going to talk coverages. That's almost an everyday thing that we're going to speak on coverages and how teams rotating and who's feeling leverage of teams and how teams are going to leverage it out. So, yeah, that's an everyday conversation right there, talking coverage.
Is there any, I mean, obviously every level is different, but is there any particular coverages that you guys spend more time on that you see a lot or that give you problems?
Not necessarily. I mean, we see a lot of quarters. We see a lot of quarters coverage. We'll see a lot of one high. We'll see a lot one high cover three. We'll see some man. We see a lot of Tampa. So I mean, there's not necessarily one that we just kind of focus on, but I mean, it's really just a game plan thing, really. So like each week it might be, let's say we're playing against a cover one, cover three type team. That week the whole focus is going to be on cover one, cover three. Next week it's a cover two, cover four, and a two high predominant team. That week, most of our focus is going to be on two high coverages. So really, it's kind of a week by week thing. And like I said, we see a lot of cover four. We see some cover one man. So cover three, stuff like that, the basics.
Now, when you introduce the cover stuff to your receivers in the spring and the fall, do you go like coverages that tend to go together, like 1 and 3, 2 and 4, or do you try to get a lot of them in it just at once? What is kind of the
No,
preference?
I try. I want everything. I want everything to make sense to them. So the way I first start explaining them is I just tell them about your safety looks, because I always tell them the safeties are going to tell you the picture. It's the safeties tell the entire story. So first thing, when you line up, the first thing you should be looking back there is to say, is the field open or closed? And that's football terminology. If it's open, we got 2 high safeties. If it's closed, we got 1 high safety. So that's kind of how we're gonna start off, by just them understanding my terminology between open and closed. So then once we go into that, now I'm gonna start putting coverages together. So I'm gonna say, okay, cover 1, cover 3, those go together. This is our cover 1. Those are our closed safety looks. You know what I'm saying? Cover 2, cover 4. Those are our open safety looks. All right, and then we'll start opening cover 1 is our man. So we got 1 guy, we got 1 back roaming, covering the middle of the field. We manned up underneath. All right, then we start, and that's all we'll really do for a whole day. We'll talk cover 1, cover 3, and the next day we'll come in talking cover 2, cover 4, and then one day we might come in and talk about nothing but zero for one whole day. Then we might come in one day and talk about nothing but quarter, half for one day. So most of the time I try to put everything together as it mirrors up with each other.
Good, Coach. And then you mentioned also earlier press coverage stuff earlier. How many different press beaters do you teach your receivers, and what are they?
All right, so really everything that I'm gonna teach is gonna start with a basis. It's gonna start with that foot fire fundamental basis. And so from there, that's when I started teaching basketball. So from when it comes to releases, I say playing receiver and going against press releases is the same thing as playing basketball and you got somebody guarding you. And the craziest thing is, I don't care where you're at, every receiver on that team feel like they the best basketball player in the world. Every receiver always feel like they're the best basketball player. So it's an easy transition for them. So I get them out there on the field, and I'll talk about, all right, a single jab. We're talking about a foot fire to the single jab. So we're going to foot fire and then single jab. So once we get a single jab, all that is us doing a crossover. It's the same thing as us doing a crossover. So they'll give a foot fire, crossover. And then the second time we'll go, okay, we're going to go foot fire. We're going to go a double jab. Foot fire, double jab. And so now it's just a foot fire to a double crossover. And so everything that we're doing, so we're going to kind of mirror everything up to where I'm basically putting everything in basketball terminology. And then from there, that basis becomes their foot fire. Now from there, that's where their comfort will start to come in. So I'll give them that basis of the single jab and the double jab. But from there, that's when a lot of those guys that start getting real comfortable in the foot fire and the single jab, now they'll start putting their own little rhythm to things. And they'll start putting, because everybody don't play the same. So now we'll start having guys they'll do different stuff with like a slide. Instead of foot firing to that spot, they might slide to that spot and give them a single jab. Instead of doing a foot fire or a slide, they might karaoke to that spot and then do a foot jab. So I'll give them a basis, which is my basis is that foot fire to the single jab, to the foot fire, to the double jab, to the diamond release. I'll give them that basis, and then from there, I'll let them gain their own rhythm to things and how they like to pick it up and how they like to do it.
Coach, top of the routes, how typically do you teach it? Is there any routes in particular that you think you teach really well at top of the route? How do you practice it, etc.?
Yeah, so for my top of the route, I always go, for instance, I'll start off by telling if we're talking curls, comebacks, I'll start off by telling the receivers, okay, you should be coming in and out of this route within 3 steps. One of the most undercoached, there's 2 parts of a route that I think is some of the most undercoached parts of route running. The first thing is that initial punch at the top of the route. So let's say I'm the receiver on the right side of the field and I got a curve. When I run off the ball, when I get to the top of my route, I'm gonna tell them it should take 3 steps. That right foot is gonna be your right foot that you're gonna stick in the ground. That's gonna be your punch foot. You're gonna stick that foot in the ground. You got to punch it in the ground. Then your left foot is gonna come in the ground, and then your third step should be a foot placement step. And that's what I was talking about. It's that trigger step, that punch, and then your foot placement at the top of the route. So foot placement and that initial punch at the top of your route are two undercoached things. And when I talk about foot placement, it's like it's basically like running a shuttle. So when I'm teaching, when you're running a shuttle, that is coaching change of direction. So when I'm changing direction, when I'm running a shuttle, when I'm running to the line, I'm not facing the line. My foot is parallel to the line. So when you're running your route, at the top of your route, you want that same type foot placement. You want your foot to be parallel instead of vertical. Because now if my feet are vertical, now my hips can't naturally open all the way back up. That's where you're gonna have your natural round at the top of the route. But if I get to the top of that and my foot is parallel to the line, now I can actually open my hips, flip my hips back, and get back downhill like I want to. So I think that is one undercoached thing on route. At the top of the route is foot placement. Everybody always says get in and out your route faster, but like I said, they're not coaching the actual foot placement of the route. And then the second thing is, like I said, that initial punch. When you're going into the route, punch that foot in the ground. That foot actually has to stick in the ground. It should take you 3 steps. It should be your right. If I was on the right side and I'm running a curl, it should be right foot, left foot, foot placement, and now you should be running out of the route.
Okay. Do you find that there are any routes that are more difficult in your guys' system for your receivers to pick up?
Not really, because everything that we do it works with each other. So once they grasp, for instance, a speed cut. Once they grasp a speed cut, now they know how to run digs, they know how to run outs, they know how to run all those different type routes in our offense. Because once if they can grasp that on both legs, they've learned how to run basically outs, digs, all that different type stuff. If they learn good foot placement at the top of their route, now they've just learned foot placement in their hips. They've just learned curls, comebacks, and everything. Almost every breaking route that we're going to have to run, they understand how to do it once they learn foot placement in their hips. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's one route that's just hard to teach. To me, it's just about teaching that fundamental and continuously teaching that technique. And from there, once they grasp that, everything else is easy. That's their God-given ability.
How do you teach a speed cut?
All right, so when if I'm sticking, like say I'm the right outside receiver and I'm going to the left, and I'm sticking to the left. All right, so it's plant. I'm gonna plant my right foot. My left foot is gonna start to define my line, and now my next step, I should be coming flat down my line. But when they're making that step, one of the key things I always say is that if I'm that right receiver and I'm sticking to go left, when that right foot goes in the ground, it has to stay under me. When my left foot comes in the ground, that left foot can't go in line or cross my right foot, because now that's going to require you to slip from under, and you're going to slide from under you. So that left foot needs to stay on that left foot needs to stay on that left side to basically start forming your line. And now that third step, you should just be bursting down that line now.
Okay, Coach. And then kind of the last thing I got for you before we go is, what have you focused on learning this offseason? What has been your focus? What are you on or off the field? What has kind of been the focus for you?
I've been looking at just a lot of different ways to basically break down film, different ways that I can put together my practice schedule of like how I'm gonna implement my drills in my indie period and different things to be going like I can do in routes on air period. And then a lot of stuff in the red zone is really kind of why I've been looking at a lot of red zone plays, patience in the red zone, route running in the red zone, just a lot of red zone stuff.
Okay, Coach. Well, Coach, I thank you for coming on and talking a little ball today. I wish you and your family nothing but safety and health, and kind of just wish you luck this season, Coach. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate you for having me.